Okay, this is it. Here we go. The attorneys for the families of Alton Sterling.
Morning, gentlemen.
Good morning,
Morning.
morning.
Good morning.
All right, ready to go? Attorney L. Chris Stewart, one of the attorneys for Alton Sterling's children. We just finished with the status conference with Judge Caldwell, and now the litigation truly begins. This is a situation where we've already been in discovery, we've been getting documents, we've been going through things, and what we've realized even further is that this was not just the act of a rogue cop, Blaine Salamone. This was a systematic failure by the police department and also those who oversee the police department. Most importantly, this is just a sign of the failures that were allowed to happen in this case. What you'll see here is an email from Sergeant Robert Knight, the firearms training officer in charge of Officer Salamone. This is 1 year before Alton Sterling was shot and killed. And in this email, you will see that his training officer called Officer Salamone nuts. Baton Rouge PD, the training officer, called Blaine Salamone borderline nuts because he got into a fight at the firing range with a fellow officer. Yet he was allowed to have a gun and patrol the streets and be in the community. And 1 year later, this borderline nuts, using the language of BRPD, officer shot and killed Alton Sterling. So, as we continue to litigate this and dig into all of this, we're going to be looking into why this borderline nuts officer, according to BRPD, was allowed to be on the streets. Why City Council didn't stop it. Did they have any communication with his high-ranking parents in the department? We'll be asking for emails, text messages of all of City Council, of all the mayors, to find out just how deep this failure goes. And we will end up getting justice for the family.
Michael Adams and Brandon DeQueer, we represent the younger 3 Sterling children. We had the opportunity today to sit for the first time with all the lawyers in this case, and we realize now that even more that there's a lot of work still to be done. We are going to litigate this case till the very end, and what that means is that we're going to unearth, like Mr. Stewart said, all of the things in the Baton Rouge Police Department over the last few years that show that Officer Salamone was not well trained. He probably should have never been a police officer. He probably would not have passed the requirements of any other agency, law enforcement agency in the country that would allow him to become a police officer. This case needs to be resolved. We call upon the City Council, we call upon the mayor to sit and listen to their lawyers and join with us in saying it's time for Baton Rouge to turn the chapter on this case. We need to resolve this case, but until they get to that point, until they make that decision, we are ready to litigate it. And it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be uneasy. It's going to bring back a lot of open wounds that we thought were healing over the last 2 years, but they haven't healed. And we're going to have to open those wounds. We're going to have to show the deficiencies in our Baton Rouge Police Department at the time, and we're going to have to show that these officers did not act. They were negligent, they were grossly negligent, they violated Mr. Sterling's constitutional rights, they violated Mr. Sterling's state rights, and somebody's going to have to pay for it.
The most important thing we got today was they now know the date. They know the date that we will try this case, and that was what was set by Judge Caldwell today. It's a first setting. There will be no exceptions to this trial date unless they decide they want to settle this matter. But now we know when we're going to be here and when we're going to be in front of a jury.
Could you say and spell your first last name, sir, and your title here?
Brandon, last name DeQueer, D-E-C-U-I-R.
And when is that trial date?
That trial date is April 20th,
Of next year?
2020.
2020.
You talked about how Officer Salamone wasn't trained properly. Is there any information that you all have that shows how he wouldn't have been, wasn't trained in a way that he could have been in another police force?
There is a manual called their Blue Book manual that lists out all of the things that an officer is supposed to do. His training in de-escalation, his training in addressing citizens that he encounters, his training in use of force. We're going to go through their entire training manual and show that Officer Salamone was deficient in all of his required training, and those deficiencies should have been known by his superiors. They should have been known by those who are in charge of the police department and of the city.
So obviously a lot of the details we've been talking about so far for the past few minutes have been regarding Officer Salamone. Anything regarding Officer Lake at this point?
We're going to look at the detail, the same level of detail and scrutiny that we're putting Officer Salamone through, we're going to put Officer Lake through. Because one of the things that a police officer has an obligation or duty to do is that if your partner has crossed the line, you're supposed to pull him back. You're supposed to stop him. You're supposed to not allow him to cross the line and stay across the line. So, you know, Officer Lake's behavior also will come under our scrutiny.
You talked about getting the family justice. Is there anything else you all are looking for in this lawsuit when it comes to structural or policy change for the Baton Rouge Police Department?
Reform. You know, the biggest thing is a case just can't be about a dollar amount. That will help the children in their future, of course, because now they no longer have a father. But it has to be about reform so that this doesn't happen again to anybody else. Because no matter what you look like, no matter if you're white or black, this can happen to you. You can run into an officer that has been called borderline nuts by his own department, and you can end up in the same position as Alton Sterling.
Mr. Stewart, could you actually tell us what happened in today's proceedings and what the future proceedings entail? We've already got a trial date. Tell us what you guys are doing.
Yes, it was just organizing discovery in the case, litigation of the case, and what's going to happen. And if the city of Baton Rouge is willing to risk not just the officers, but the city with a massive verdict, then that's on the city council. They're risking the future of the city, you know, so we're willing to take that risk if need be. The last verdict that I got from a jury was $1 billion. So if they're willing to put that risk up against this team, we'll take it.
And can you tell, just for people at home, what this trial is actually going to look like, what it entails, just for someone who's not?
Painful for the city and all involved. And if we get there, we get there, but we hope the city steps up.
And what's your goal from this trial? What would you say would be satisfactory?
Yeah, that the truth comes out. You know, that the truth of things like this, you can't hide stuff like this. You know, this was so serious a year before he was shot that they emailed his senior officer. This wasn't just some little argument at the gun range. It was a brawl where they called him nuts, but they didn't take his gun.
Let me ask you, you asked a question, what do we want to see come out of this?
Do you guys have a dollar figure in mind? What do you guys
Well, no, not that though, because many of us didn't feel like we had a proper resolution from the federal government. Many of us didn't feel like we got a proper resolution from the state, the Attorney General, when they viewed this. Here's a chance for us really to get in and look at the conduct of these officers and get a civil jury to decide that these officers were wrong. The way they handled themselves that night, they killed Alton Sterling. Their use of force was excessive, was unnecessary, and it violated every sense of decency in law enforcement in this community. So we want to see the truth come out, and we want to see justice for these kids. And so, no, we're not allowed to put a dollar amount in a petition when you file a lawsuit, but we will ask the jury at the proper time to come back with a dollar amount, and we're just not there yet.
All right, thank you, and we'll leave this with y'all.
Thank you,
Zoom
sir.
in on it.
Thank you.
Y'all have a good afternoon.
Just gonna take a switch.